feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rorabeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchen.
Are we ready to sing more about seagulls, Matt, today?
Seagulls, the most majestic of birds. Just love them.
They love French fries in McDonald's parking lots.
They do, yeah, they do. When I was a kid at Sauble Beach, where my cottage was, just seagulls everywhere, man. If you left any food out, they just swarm you. You get kids chasing them all the time. Freaking beach rats. Today we are reviewing.
I always thought the rat version of a bird was considered the pigeon.
Yeah, I would say that, but then I would say the seagull is the pigeon of the beach. Today we are reviewing Sir Kenneth Branagh's Belfast, which just premiered at the both at Telluride and at the Toronto International Film Festival.
Yep.
His very personal black and white love letter to his childhood in Belfast, Ireland. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Matt. It's day 6, 7, 8, 9,
6,
10.
I think. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, is it Tuesday? Tuesday.
Yeah, it is Tuesday.
6.
We're about halfway through the festival, and we're watching more digital stuff as we
digital.
I'm not drunk, I swear. It's just really, really tired. But
one too many Guinness for Eric.
Yeah, and too many movies. But we're at that halfway point, and it is interesting that this was one of our last in-person screenings for the most part.
Well, I think they were only doing P&I screenings until today, I think, anyway. I think it was only
with the exception of Wolf.
But Wolf is only
public, but it's still in person.
We have that, but I mean, just press and industry screenings for this year only lasted until yesterday, I believe. So most people who came in, you can still get public tickets to the rest of the festival, which is running until Sunday, the 19th. But yeah, it was our last press and industry screening, and then we might have one or two more in-person screenings. But so we finally have a chance to kind of chill at home. But it was nice, this being the last one, to go in and see it in the Ultra AVX theater over at Scotiabank.
Yeah, and overall, Belfast is an interesting one to talk about because in one way it's a very sweet, charming, earnest, as you mentioned, a love letter to Belfast and the community, and being raised in the late 1960s and coming of age at a time of civil unrest, with Protestants and Catholics in Ireland fighting, and the IRA, and it being shot in black and white. And the obvious comparison will be this movie,
Roma, yes, which I mentioned in my tweet, and I'm sure many people will.
But
black and white with the yellow title card,
right? But without maybe the technical prowess that Alfonso Cuarón had.
I don't disagree there. Even though I did not like Roma, but I understand that.
This does go for, it is trying really hard to kind of play with certain camera angles and style, but it's more heartfelt than it is a sort of piece of technical craft.
Yeah.
And again,
it's a masterclass of filmmaking or anything.
Yeah, and not to say that Sir Kenneth Branagh is not capable of that. I mean,
very capable.
His career has been kind of fascinating in general because he's a guy who started, or was best known for, adapting, Shakespeare adaptations. He was that guy, Henry V, Hamlet, Much Ado About Nothing, Thor, which actually has a cameo in this. But
I like those little moments. We'll get into those.
But you look at those movies from the late 80s into the 90s, and then somewhere in the early 2000s, he kind of the Shakespeare adaptation, he kind of was just known for that, and it was kind of cliched at that point. Then you get to Thor, his Jack Ryan adaptation, Cinderella, and he's
his
kind
Agatha Christie,
Murder on
coming out.
Murder on the Orient Express, Um, and this will I'm gonna make fun of this, but you know, Artemis Fowl, I think, is one of the worst movies in the last 10 years. And
It's really bad, yeah.
partly I think it was taken away from him, or at least he lost kind of creative control in the editing process. And then sandwich in between that, or bookending those two things, is that you mentioned Death on the Nile, which has been delayed multiple times, partly because of the
Yeah,
pandemic, but also because of problematic actors, you know, doing horrible things,
yeah.
and maybe trying to wait or figure out what to do with that sequel. Um, and so Belfast kind of feels almost like a reaction not only to a lot of these coming of age movies we've gotten with Roma or Minari or Lady Bird in uh, recent memory. And so, you know, it's him doing this little, very quaint story that, you know, is essentially his upbringing, even though I'm sure, you know, it is
There's some
semi-autobiographical and
artistic
not
liberties probably, but yeah.
exactly. um and you know, the main character coming from the perspective of a young boy named Buddy, who's played by Jude Hill in what I believe is his first feature length performance, is surrounded by a really solid cast of actors. Obviously, you have Judi Dench, who Branagh has worked with in Artemis Fowl and Murder on the Orient Express, and then, you know, the great Kieran Hines, and they're playing the grandparents. And then you have Katrina Balfe and Jamie Dornan as mom and dad, and sort of looking at these relationships over the course of half of a year, and seeing, you know, decisions that are going to kind of play a major role in whether or not they stay in Belfast. And I think
Mhm.
that it's hard to criticize this movie
Yeah.
because it is just so likable and nice, but at the same time, my
It's
biggest
hard to find
criticism,
anything really spectacular
yeah,
either.
it's a
Yeah.
perfectly well made
Crowd pleaser
crowd pleaser that probably will win the Oscar, or at least is the front runner at this point. Like, it kind of feels
for best
made
picture,
for
yeah.
that crowd, especially with people that maybe grew up in the late
A lot of references to
1960s.
cinema and a love of cinema, all the kind of things you're looking for in a movie that's going to, get a lot of Oscar nominations. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, man. Like, where I feel like I don't have much to say, neither positive nor negative on the movie, but I ultimately really enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
I think it took me a second to kind of, and I thought the movie got better as it went on. It took me a little second to acclimate myself maybe to Jude Hill, because he is very much the center of the film. And I feel like at first, some of the dialogue and the delivery from some of the child actors, I was just like, ooh, I don't know if I'm. It can be hit or miss, right? Like, we just watched Petite Maman, and we talked about how natural and organic and real that movie feels like. And ultimately, this movie similarly is dealing with, adult problems from a child lens, which I think is interesting, but it is in a very slight way, where I feel like Petite Maman, goes, is rich with emotion, which we talked about. Go check out that review. It's probably one of the best films of the year and one of the best movies at the festival, but unfortunately it won't get the love that maybe this movie does.
Right.
But that being said, like, I think Jamie Dornan is great in this, which is, people, I tweeted that and some people messaged me other stuff he was good in, but I did not like Synchronic, sorry, or other things, but maybe I haven't seen him in, but I loved him in Barb and Star earlier this year, and I thought he was actually quite good in this as well. And I'm like, is Jamie Dornan a great actor, or a,
As
or a
long
very
as he
good one?
sings in a scene,
Yeah,
he's
so he
good.
does have he does perform in this much like he does in Barb and Star. And then overall, it's a very lovely movie. I just, again, everything we talked about, like, I never think it ever kind of exceeds. I said this, comparing it to other things we've seen during the festival, that I will give a similar rating to. Power of the Dog, we just reviewed. Go check that out. um, Memoria, T10, for me personally, have very high highs, but then there are some big lows for me of why it didn't work. Last Night in Soho. These are all movies that are kind of in this same realm, but then Belfast is that one where it doesn't necessarily hit any of those highs those other movies do, but then it never really hits any lows. It just kind of completely stays steady.
Coasts.
Yeah, it coasts. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that because I think people will really dig it because of that. But it's just it's not something I ever really need to go back and revisit or I'll really think about again, other than this Oscar season when it
Yeah.
starts. But again, I'm not going to be upset once it gets nominated for a bunch of awards or as the front runner or anything. I'm just going to go, okay, yeah, that was a sweet movie. I just don't really have a strong opinion on it. Like I like how personal it is, the cinematography, the black and white, again, something we've seen in, other movies we mentioned. Thought it looked a little too digital for the 1969 time period, and the black and white contrast on that I think didn't quite work. But I liked how personal it was. It seemed like he really did love his childhood and he loved this place. And I like all the references to movies he loved as a kid. I like the Thor comic book. I like the Agatha Christie novel in his bedroom. Like those are a little bit kind of like silly a bit or a bit on the nose, but if it without him saying that it is about him, because it never once says it is. It's just he's talked about it being his most personal film. He was obviously born in Belfast. It's just very obvious that it's about him. But yeah, again, that's kind of all I really have to say about it. Like it again, it's that perfect kind of middle of the road, but like not. I don't mean that negatively.
Or the bright side of the road, because Van Morrison's music is
Yeah,
used throughout this entire
there's no
thing.
score, right? Like it's just
It's just
Van
all
Morrison's
his, yeah, it's
music.
just all
Yeah.
his music, and I like Van Morrison a lot, but I feel like it's overkill. It's almost like the same way where it's like if you have a Vietnam movie, you use the Doors throughout the entire
Sure.
film. It's almost weirdly cliched where Van Morrison is an Irish musician, but it just kind of feels like with the exception of Everlasting Love, which Jamie Dornan sings at the end, it just becomes a little too much after a while. And as much as I love that song, Bright Side of the Road, it also made me laugh a little bit because the last time I heard that song used in a movie was the John Travolta Angel film, Michael, which again, obviously their intentions of how they're used in both of those movies are completely different. It's just funny thinking about like, okay, this is the last time, you hear a song and you have this certain context, and there's a lot of montages in this as well. There's a very strong stance of community and also kind of looking at that division between Protestants and
And acceptance and
Catholics.
saying that shit doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like even kind of how religion in general kind of tears people apart. And a lot of the movie references are interesting, and even the television stuff, because again, it's not a lot of stuff you would necessarily think that have influenced Kenneth Branagh.
Other than the two very obvious ones that I pointed out.
What ones?
No, just the Thor and Agatha Christie thing that he's
Well, that
referencing. But you mean like the movie stuff,
yeah, like those almost feel like I made
Easter
adaptations
eggs,
of
like
those,
it's about
but
me.
I'm
Yeah,
talking more
like Star
about,
Trek, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
yeah, but even the westerns, like
Yeah,
Kenneth, like High Noon with
yeah,
Gary
High Noon.
Cooper,
Yeah,
and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance with John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart and Lee Marvin. There's even a sequence that mirrors High Noon,
yeah.
and it just like I just found that fascinating in an
That was a
interesting
fun
way
sequence.
because
I like that in the
oh,
movie.
I did
Yeah.
too. I would have never thought of Kenneth Branagh as a Western guy,
Maybe that's him saying I want to make a Western and I haven't
right?
been able to yet.
And this is the closest to doing that. But I just thought that was kind of fascinating, and just again like that childhood perspective of like getting into trouble, and having one parent who's kind of the good cop bad cop kind of thing, where Katrina Balfe is sort of the one that dishes out the punishments, where Jamie Dornan's dad is always away on business in England, and it's also good for him because he's not getting caught up in sort of the recruitment of the Protestants trying to get as many people on their side to commit these violent acts, and the IRA being a terrorist group, and
Hmm.
seeing that and seeing the danger of that kind of escalating throughout the movie, I think is really important to kind of you know emphasize in sort of it being more so the backdrop. And that also kind of reminded me of Roma a little bit too, where you had you know Mexico at that time in when it's depicted in Roma, there was this civil unrest as well that's depicted on the peripheral kind of point of view. And then the stuff that I think that really got me in terms of just like maybe like the emotion is just the relationship between Buddy and his grandfather, played by Kieran
Yeah.
Hines, who is so wonderful in one scene that takes
The
place at
math
a
homework?
hospital. Well,
Or no,
that's
I
really
thought
good.
that
But
one
at the
too, but
hospital, I
the
think
hospital,
is
okay, yeah.
really beautiful right before Christmas. And just, you know, that conversation and where that goes. And again, like I always think of Kieran Hines, who's been around forever, but as the best version of Julius Caesar in HBO's Rome. And Judi Dench is also really wonderful as the grandmother. But yeah, it's one of those movies like, you know,
I
it's gonna
just know
be
him as Steppenwolf from Zack Snyder's Justice League, so.
sure. But it is
I'm
fascinating.
kidding, I'm
I no,
kidding.
I know, no. For people, like, yeah, Matt's seen him in a lot of stuff. He's also really great in Steven Spielberg's Munich. Like he's
Ghost
been
Rider:
around.
Spirit of Vengeance, like
Yeah, well, he was Mephisto in that, so you know.
uh,
Um,
yeah, he was.
yeah,
Yeah.
because Peter Fonda played him in the first Ghost Rider movie, and then Kieran Hines
Right,
played him in the second one.
right, right.
Um, yeah, but the other movie it reminded me a lot of, just in terms, it's not a movie that people remember really anymore, is John Borman's Hope and Glory, which is a World War II set British coming of age film where it's from the point of view of a kid who's growing up during the war, and you know, like the bombings, and sort of seeing it from the point of view of like this childhood innocence where, you know, school is canceled because, you know, Hitler declares war, and then you have this British boy running down the streets happy that school's been canceled, thanking Adolf Hitler, and you're kind of like, okay, this is like,
Mhm.
you know, the kid doesn't understand what he's saying. But
And there's a
that
few
move,
moments of that where you know, Buddy gets caught up in, you know, what's going on in Ireland at that
yeah, and he
time,
has a
whether it's
cousin that
looting a
kind of gets
store
him into
and yeah,
trouble too, with
yeah,
like stealing, you know, chocolate from a
or
uh
dish soap.
yeah, or Turkish delight.
Yeah.
But going back to Hope and Glory, nobody talks about that movie anymore. It's kind of, you know, it was
Right.
released in 87. It gets nominated for best picture and director and other Oscar nominations, but you look back at it now, like it's just not a film that anybody really has any sort of sentiment
And
for.
could you think that that could be applied to this maybe in the
Yes, I
future?
think,
Yeah.
again, it'll take time, but I don't necessarily see this movie, you know, being held in the same regard as Roma or as Lady Bird or as Minari or a lot of these really personal coming of age movies we've gotten in the last little while. This is just kind of a very, it's one of those films that, again, like I don't want to, it sounds like I'm being really negative towards the movie, but it kind of just feels almost like a placeholder for like the awards, where it's like, okay, yeah, like this movie,
Here's the
fine,
super
this is the
safe
film that,
choice. Yeah.
this is the film that everybody can agree on. Like nobody is going to, there's going to be people that love Power of the Dog, there's going to be people that, you know, love those kind of off kilter choices, but it's not going to
Mhm.
be the film that everybody will be like, okay, you know what, we can all agree on this movie.
Mhm.
And that's how it's going to play with this award season coming up, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I liked it quite a bit, but again, I think it does coast through, and it is a movie like Eric just mentioned that I think, as much as I enjoyed it for that one watch, and that if I'm talking to, you know, my mom and she's asking, oh, my girlfriends and I want to go to the movies this weekend, what's playing? If Belfast is playing, I'm gonna go. Yeah, here's a movie you're all going to enjoy, and it's just a very safe choice to suggest to anyone, really. Like, and I feel like that's how I'm going to view it, you know, when it comes out on November 12th. So I'm going to give it a 3.5. I still liked it quite a bit. I just ultimately think it never kind of gets past that hump of just being really decent.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. And then also the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention,
Yeah.
I wasn't the biggest fan of the use of color in the movie in
Hmm.
terms of how it's seen on a big screen or
Hmm.
during a theatrical production. The
That's the
other,
only time you see color, and then the bookend of the movie in
which I
present
also
day,
did not like, because I feel
which you
that
don't need, right?
you don't need it. It almost looks like, especially in the opening, it almost looks like you're watching like a travel log
I
on
thought a
YouTube. That's
tourism
like a
video. Yeah.
like, yeah, that's like, you know, you're waiting for the 5 seconds so you can skip it, but it's almost like,
Right.
come to Belfast, you
Yeah.
know, like I was waiting for that.
Regina. Regina
Exactly.
experience Regina.
But then also the other interesting movie thing that I thought was kind of, again, intentional. We were talking about Cumberbatch's casting. There's an actor who plays a Protestant minister, and
Oh,
he
right.
looks so much like Orson Welles, and I think again that is intentional. Which I
Mhm.
just, those little touches I think work. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of, like, the color offsetting, the black and white, and those
Yeah.
key moments of, like, childhood wonder at the majesty of going to the movie theaters. We get it. You became a filmmaker. Like, it's
Yeah, I'm almost fine with the stuff in the theater. It's the stuff at the beginning and the end I just found completely unnecessary. Like, unless you have scenes in modern day Belfast, like, just start your movie in
where I
black and
almost
white.
thought
I don't
that there
know.
was going to be something where, like, almost like Kenneth Branagh, like, introduces it or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah,
that.
like Buddy grown up. It's just
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh at
Or
like
just
a
Kenneth Branagh breaking
um
the fourth wall. Like, because I remember, like, with at the end of Schindler's List, there's the scene. Well, it's not a scene. The survivors, Schindler's Jews. They all come to Oscar Schindler's grave and put stones on his grave, and it's done in real time. And then you see kind of like,
it's done with the real people, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and then you see Liam Neeson's hand putting a stone on the grave as well. So I was thinking, oh, is he doing something like that in terms of, like,
But no, it's
coming
really
back
just an
to it?
establishing shot, and that's pretty much it. So I agree with you that it's strange, but yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. We have many more reviews that you guys can check out right here on YouTube, on the Untitled YouTube channel. So hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. We have tons of reviews up right now for some of the biggest movies, like Dune, like Last Night in Soho, like T10. So some of the biggest stuff playing the Toronto International Film Festival. So go check those out. Or if you like the audio version, you can get that at Untitled Movie Reviews on podcast services everywhere. Our one-stop shop for all of our links to our social channels, our reviews, our lists, our personal profiles. Go over to Letterboxd at Untitled_movies. It's our headquarters for all that stuff. And as always, my name is Matt Rorabeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, mostly on UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all of the social medias at Matt Rorabeck.
And I'm Eric Marchen. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene, and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
No one likes Turkish delight.